guys, Callie the dog trainer here to talk a little more in depth about training equipment. This is a topic that can get controversial because some people have a lot of passion about what they use on their dogs. And I'm not here to tell anybody who's right or who's wrong, but I'm just gonna tell you what I know, and you can apply it as you like, or you can realize that it's not for you, and that's fine. So first things first is that if you have a harness and you're noticing in my display that I don't, it's because I have strong feelings about harnesses pretty much every time I go to a client's house who tells me, my dog just pulls on the leash, I can't control them, it's ridiculous, I've stopped walking my dog. And I ask them typically, what are you walking your dog on? A harness that I got from whatever. And I'm like, okay, so I'm sorry that you maybe thought that you had to use that training equipment with your dog, but it might not be that your dog is the right candidate for that. And a lot of people don't know this, but dogs are 4 times as strong as their body weight. So if I'm 100 pounds, I have a 25-pound dog, we're even. I should have equal amounts of strength with that dog, given my age and other things, right? So then if you have a dog who is bigger than a quarter of your body weight, they have leverage on you. I have neighbors in my neighborhood who have 2 huskies who I've seen them put this belt-like thing connecting a leash to a harness on their huskies, and it's a ridiculous sight to see where they're like walking and they're digging their heels in because their dogs are just pulling them forward. And so anyway, harnesses are great for the right candidate, right? So if you've got a really small dog, then you might be able to use a harness. If you have a dog who has ever had a traumatic experience, such as a trachea collapse, or they've broken their spine somewhere, that will tell you like you cannot use a regular collar. You're gonna need to use a harness to walk your dog because they don't have as much power and it causes them pain. So those dogs are good candidates for a harness, right? The other dogs are the ones who are actually intentioned to use the harness the way it was designed, because the harness gives the dog the full amount of strength that it can use to pull. So if you think of the Iditarod up in Alaska, where they have got Malamute mixes and they're pulling a sled with a person and their dog food and all their gear, they're wearing harnesses. And then if you think about people who do search and rescue with dogs, they've got dogs who are trained to pull sleds. They might be pulling bodies out of the snow, and they need those dogs to be able to pull with their full body strength. So if you don't have a dog running in the Iditarod, if you don't have a dog who's pulling people out of the snow, if you don't have a dog who's really small, under a quarter of your weight, or if you don't have a dog who has a medical injury, then your dog doesn't have to wear a harness. And I know a lot of people think, oh, but they're so humane and that's what everybody wants, their dogs to be wearing these days. And I tell my dog clients, I'm like, you know what? You do what you need to, because you know your dog better than anybody else, and you have to take care of your dog 24/7. So you choose what's right for your dog. And if people look at you funny, you can just look at them funny back. Doesn't matter. So anyway, so that is why I do not have any harnesses here, because harnesses do not give an owner or a trainer who's working to do obedience training with their dogs the ability to correct their dogs if they are deciding to break a position or a behavior, or if they decide to misbehave, I should say. So what I've got here are a couple of things that I use, and I'm going to talk about each one of them. One of the things that I like to do in dog training is make analogies, and I like to make analogies about things based on things that I have experience with. So I used to be a high school Spanish teacher, and one of the things that we learned in our up-and-coming teacher certification program is about different types of learners. And I'm sure that you might recognize you've got learners who are auditory, right? They have to use their sight and their hearing, visual, auditory, visual. And then you might have kinesthetic, where they have to feel, or they have to put their hands on stuff, they have to do it so that they actually can get that process down. And I find it really interesting because I think within dog training equipment, you have a lot of options that have those components too, where you've got like the kinesthetic learner or the auditory learner. Obviously visual is going to be all of them, because a dog knows if they're on a leash with you or not. They behave much better typically on a leash than if they were free roaming. So anyway, this first item is called a slip leash, and it is very similar to a choke chain, which a lot of people know about. You can make it large to go over the dog's neck. You would fit it so that it isn't tight and compressing, but that it allows for them to stay in there, which means they can't slip out if you need them to. You do that by adjusting a leather tab, and then they are set, right? They can't slip out, they can't go anywhere. Vets' offices, shelters, animal control services, they use this because it gives them the most amount of control without causing a huge aversive experience with the dog. And so that might mean that if you have a dog that is a feral dog and you're trying to take it into animal services to get care for it or put it into a shelter, if that dog is maybe even a little bit aggressive and they want to come up the leash, you can use that leash to create distance. And if they realize that they need air more than they need to attack you, you can prevent a bite, which would probably help them not get euthanized. And that's one of the goals anytime that you work with an animal. So anyways, a choke chain is kind of for those auditory learners because, as you can hear, it makes a noise. So you could click a regular 6-foot leash onto this and it functions exactly the same as a slip leash. And it gives that dog a little bit of warning. So if that dog pulls too far from the owner, that pressure and that sound is going to happen and they're going to go, that's not good, I don't like how that feels, I'm going to come back and get close to my owner. So it teaches the dog if they're within proximity, it's a good sensation. If they're pulling, they're going to get a little bit of a choking sensation and they're not going to like that. And some dogs don't even care. So then we move on. Nice. So those are those two. This is a little nicer because it covers more area. It is just a regular nylon collar with that martingale chain feature, so it makes a sound and it helps them to realize that pressure is coming on the leash. So if they pull and it gets a little bit tight, then they might realize I need to come back to my owner. So that's a little nicer because it doesn't actually, it's only so large. So unlike these two, which can, as hard as the dog wants to pull, it's going to continue to tighten, this won't tighten as much. And so that could be for a dog who, responds to that. If that doesn't work, and this is kind of the order that I go with my clients, I don't typically use a choke chain because if they don't do too well on this, I'm just going to move to this. And if this doesn't work, then I'm going to move to these. These are called Star Mark collars. I think they only sell the large size at Petco, and I don't think they sell the small size. So contrary to popular belief, people think, oh, well, you're gonna get a big one for a big dog and a small one for a small dog. That's not what it has to do with. Each of these pieces are going to go around the circumference of your dog's neck. And the more pieces it requires, the more communication that your dog's gonna get if you have to give your dog a tug on a leash. So if you have a dog that the large Star Mark works, then you don't have to go to the small one. But if this one isn't enough, then you might go to the small one because you might say, hey, my dog needs a little more communication. They are pokey. You can see that they're kind of pokey. They are not sharp. They will not puncture. And I will tell you another thing. If you have a dog that has a double coat, like a German Shepherd or a Husky or a Chow, these are not going to work for your dog because they have too much hair for this to really get through to make a difference. So with that in mind, if you've got a dog that has a double coat, or if you have a dog that is pretty intense or prey driven, or you just have a strong dog that maybe wants to go and greet every other dog and just completely forget you exist, and these don't work, then you might move over to a metal prong collar. It's also called a pinch collar or a German collar. People don't know this, but this collar was designed by a chiropractic veterinarian who did not probably want to use a slip collar because you could strangle your dog if your dog wanted to give you enough grief and you had to protect yourself. This actually distributes pressure evenly but spaced apart, whereas this or this is going to give you pressure all the way around, which can cause strangulation. So this is actually a little bit nicer of a tool, and it can get through thick hair. So you might say, hey, let's start with the large prong, and If that doesn't work, then you might go to the small prong. This is a 3mm, this is a 2.25mm. My girl is Australian cattle dog mixed with German Shepherd. She is on this one. And my boy, who is a Pittweiler, is on this one. And sometimes people will say, do I have to use that for the rest of their life? Or can I eventually wean them away from it? And it depends on the dog and the owner, to be honest. So when you think about what tool that you want to use with your dog, there's a few factors to consider. It's going to be the owner's willingness to apply pressure on the leash to the dog's intensity as its personality goes, the thickness of their coat, and typically it's going to have to deal with if they're a timid dog or a pushy dog. All of those factors matter. I had an older client who he adopted a Staffordshire Terrier, was a really strong dog, and he was older. He lived in a condominium complex that didn't have a very even parking lot, and his dog was desperate in need of training. And I think we maybe could have gotten away with any of these four, but because I didn't want him to have his dog pull him and make him fall and hurt himself, I put his dog immediately on a 2.25. And that worked for his dog. He was older, he wasn't necessarily quite as strong, and he couldn't move as well, and his balance wasn't perfect, and I wanted him to have more leverage on his dog for his safety. But it just depends. With a lot of dogs, I will start at the very low end, and I will progressively move up, because I want to give the dog just enough communication to make impact, but I don't ever want to overwhelm the dog. There are some dogs who are not good candidates for some of these. They might be too timid, or they might be fearful, and you might have to do a few sessions with that dog to build rapport so that they can trust that if you put on one of these, that they know that you're there to help them and not there to harm them. So all that being said, there's a lot of options out there. There are some things that wrap around your dog's snout, and people are like, oh my gosh, these are wonderful. And in all reality, if you had a dog that got real wound up on that leash and it was around their snout, they can give themselves a concussion. And there's a lot of nerve endings in their nose, and so it's really painful for the thing that wraps around their snout. I think it's called a gentle leader. I don't think it's so gentle. And you know, they might have other things where they have harnesses with a clip in the front. If they try to pull forward, it's going to make them turn around. I can see some value in that, but you have to be really careful, because some of the harnesses that are out there are designed to push into the dog's frame in such a way that it really hurts and damages their muscle. And I've seen owners who just have their dogs wearing harnesses 24/7 because they have to try to get a hold of them. And you can cause wear on their musculature, and it can be really not good for them. So all that to say that I hope this has been helpful to you, and if you have any questions about what might be right for your dog, let me know. Not only are there different types of collars, but you don't want it to be hanging like a necklace, and you don't want it to be super, super tight. You need it to fit well, and it needs to be resting above their flat collar. So just because they're wearing one of these doesn't mean that you're gonna get rid of their flat collar, because that flat collar is for identification. You might have a tag with your dog's name and your phone number on it. Leave that on your dog, and then add one of these if you go outside. So, Callie the dog trainer here to help you with all the knowledge that you need for your dog. Have a good day.